Now, this is an award from Print Planet, and we're talking today with Chris Travis from Koenig & Bauer, and we're going to learn about a few of the things that they're doing to make productivity better on their offset presses. So one of the things I found out about is doing some research, Chris, is there's SIS. Why don't you tell us what that means and what it's for, and what the benefit is that it brings to the print provider?
Would be happy to, Noel. Thank you very much. Yes, Chris Travis, Koenig & Bauer, Director of Technology. And thank you for mentioning SIS. SIS stands for Sensoric In-Feed System. What does that mean? We do not have a traditional side guide like others do. We have what we call the Sensoric In-Feed System. And now the sheet will come down, hit the head stops. And instead of using a vacuum side guide to register the sheet, we use the in-feed drum. And the in-feed drum will now register that sheet to a sensor. What we found was with press speeds of 18, 20,000 sheets an hour, an area of challenge was the traditional vacuum side guide. Sheet comes down, hits the head stops, and then pulls over, hits a mechanical side guide, and then moves on. That was slow and antiquated. So we now have what we call this SIS. Again, the sheet comes down, it hits the head stops, and now the in-feed drum has a hold of the sheet and will move the sheet to the sensor on the in-feed. So it's a much quicker way of registering the sheet and allowing us to keep up consistently with speeds of 20,000 an hour. And way more accurate as well. If you think about a lightweight sheet just being pulled in the corner is very inaccurate, and it can cause misregister and also trips. Now we have the whole of the gripper system gripping across the front edge of the sheet, moving it to the sensor. And there's videos that we can show that are online to explain it a little bit better. But we've had this feature now for probably 15 years. We make it standard on our high-speed presses. We still have a vacuum side guide for our slower presses, but for high speed, we need the SIS to be able to, again, keep up with the press and make it more consistent, less trips, more productivity. And it's been a strong system for us. We're very happy to have it, and it's a feature we like talking about a lot. So thanks for mentioning it.
I saw the video of it before we got on, and it was interesting to hear you explain it. It really clarifies the way it works from the video, because I couldn't understand quite what was happening. And the video had an animation that showed how the sheet gets registered, but you explaining it really helps, really clarifies it, so I understand what is really going on there. And no wonder it can run at a high speed.
Yeah,
I mean, it's got to be a lot better than a vacuum feed system.
And for me, I always look at things from an operator's point of view, because I be a press operator. And with a vacuum side guide, most operators are going to know that when you put the pile into the press, you always have to off-center it.
Yep.
Depending on which side guide you're running on. But with SIS, you put the pile in the middle, and the SIS will pull the sheet or push the sheet to the sensor. And what's nice about that is nothing stopping a sheet from going down to hit the head stops. So it really does help with less make ready as well. And really, you don't need a lot of attention at the feeder because the feeder head, the feeder pile, and the SIS is all part of a closed loose system. It's constantly speaking to each other. And if it's starting to push more or pull more, it's going to say, hey, to the feeder and to the pile, bring it back into the middle. So it's constantly talking to each other instead of having an operator there attending to it. So yeah, it's a cool system. And from a press operator's point of view, it's a nice feature because it just works and you know, it takes something off the table for you to be concerned about.
Sure, understand. Now, another thing you're doing, this is also coming from a press operator point of view, I think that's probably pretty important, is roller measurement. Talk to me about that, because I thought rollers are just going to be the same size and everything's going to work a certain way.
Yeah, well, that's another thing from a press operator's point of view. Measuring and adjusting the rollers has never been something that an operator can't wait to do. It's always been, I'll do that next week. I'll do that next week. And so, you know, us as manufacturers are always looking at ways to improve the press from an operator's point of view and make it easier to operate. And so we have this roller measuring system now. And basically, you know, you choose the rollers that you want to measure. So for example, say you have a 4-color press and you want to check all the foam rollers to the plate on each unit. You would select units 1, 2, 3, 4. You would press a button, and what happens now is it feeds a sheet through the press, and it takes the measurements from the plate and it prints it onto the sheet. It's all just a matter of timing and rollers on, rollers off, but it leaves that impression on the blanket. We print it, and then ultimately it spits out a sheet. We put it on the console, and we take a piece of film, we lay it over the sheet, and now we can see the measurements on this side and on both sides of the sheet for each of the foam rollers on the plate. That is huge because now it's really easy to measure. Then you would obviously see, hey, unit number 2, foam roller number 3 is a little light this side, and then you would go up to the unit and make the adjustment. But what's nice is that you're going to do that more often. So it's really easy to do. So say you do that every week. It means that you're never going to get too far out of whack, and you're always going to be maintaining a nice roller stripe. And we all know the importance of a nice roller stripe to print quality, ink water balance, and so on. So really, to do it more often, meaning that it's never going to get out of whack, also will extend your roller life as well, because you're never going to get to a point where a roller is really heavy and kind of cause damage to the roller and shorten the lifespan. So doing it more often, keeping a nice stripe, has significant benefits, and it's easy to do now.
Sure, that makes a big difference. And another thing I thought that was interesting that I've read about is it sort of ties to the roller measurement, being able to do it more often, being able to get more reliable results, is blanket tensioning. That isn't something I'd really thought about, but that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, again, another operator challenge. Changing blankets, you're not doing it that often, or you certainly don't want to be doing it that often. But when you do it, it can take a little bit of time. So we now have an automatic blanket changing system. So you would remove the rear edge by pressing a button, and it automatically untensions the blanket. So it allows us to remove it, take it off, press a button, and it would take the front edge out. And then when you reload a new blanket, instead of having to torque it yourself, you press a button and it winds it in. And then you take the blanket into the press, put the back edge in, press a button, it winds it in, and it will auto tension to the correct torque. So that's fairly straightforward. But what I really like about it, Noel, is that after you run, say, 1,000 sheets, from the console, you can hit a button and it auto tensions again to the correct torqueness, which is a very important point. We all know that after you run a new blanket, after so many impressions, you should retension that blanket because it can get a bit loose at the back. Now we all know that. Now, do we all do that? Hopefully, but I'm sure there are times where we're not. But what's really nice now is at a convenient time for you on the press, you would just press a button on the respective unit, and it's going to auto tension to get it back to that correct torque. Again, going to be improving print quality, less downtime. You don't have to go to the unit to do it. So it's a real nice, easy feature again for the operator to retorque the blanket. So I like that as an operator. Not a really big ticket item on a quote, and it's not something maybe people talk about, but as an operator, it would jump out as a really nice feature.
I can see that, and it's a labor saving kind of thing. And again, it's sort of like the roller measurement part. It means something an operator is more likely to do more often.
Correct.
And if you're more likely to do more often, the higher their quality is going to be.
Exactly.
It's the time to do.
Exactly, because all of the things we all know that, like setting rollers, it's a challenge, and it's time consuming. But because you can do this more often, you're never going to get it to a point where it's too far out of whack. Retention blankets, you don't want to go back up to the unit you've just spent a ton of time on, but to be able to press a button to retension, these are nice little things that operators will definitely resonate with, and me as an ex-operator, I always like those features, and that's what we really wanted to focus on in this new generation of presses at Koning & Bauer is addressing some of the challenge points of an operator. Of course, we know make readies have really reduced in time now, but do we take more seconds off? It's hard, yeah. Speeds are very fast now, but so this focus of for this generation of presses has been really to support the operator in their day-to-day challenges.
One last thing I wanted to talk to you about is you're doing all these things. You're saying it certainly makes the operator's life a lot easier. But some of the things I've read, you also have done some things that help reduce the overall maintenance load, both for the operator and for your own technicians when they come in.
Yeah, sure. Another part of the press that takes time is the maintenance of a press. And of course, we all know the importance of maintenance on the press. But if we're all going to be honest with ourselves, there's times where it's been, we'll do it next week, or we need to get this job out, keep printing. So for us, the maintenance part of the press, we've certainly addressed, and we wanted to reduce the maintenance time needed on the press to give you more uptime and to more print time. So what have we done? We have central lubrication on each unit. So each unit has its own central lubrication pod that's going to grease the major points. So that's taken care of, so out of the operator's hand. We've also now been able to use our what we call long life gripper shafts, and there's no grease points within the sheet travel now. And that's huge, because everybody will know from an operator's, you're always a bit nervous about over greasing the grease points within the sheet, because then you can get a bit of grease splashing, and it can be sporadic, and it's a challenge. So what we now have is what we call our long life gripper shafts, and they're sealed bearings, and there's no need now as an option to be able to have to grease within the sheet travel. So not only is that nice because you don't have to grease within the sheet path, but also you don't have to do it, and that reduces the grease points on a press. So on a 6-color coater, over 200 less grease points on a press, so significantly saving a lot of time, and really helping just from a maintenance point of view. So there's still maintenance on the press. It's going to indicate that on the console to tell you when it needs to be done, and then you have to confirm that you've done it. But significantly less grease points, meaning that you're going to have more uptime on the press, and really just an easier press to operate and to maintain.
Well, that's important, because these presses are big investments. So a print provider wants to make sure that they're going to be able to get the most out of the press, the most throughput they can, and by cutting down the amount of maintenance, the amount of attention they have to do, things like roller measurement and blanket tensioning, and even something like SIS, it makes a big difference for the press owner. He sees this press is going to be more economical for him to operate. It was interesting to hear you talk about sealed bearings. That's something the aviation industry and the automotive industry has done for a long time. But sealed bearings do make a lot of difference. You never have to think about them. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and I think maybe years ago they weren't at the level that they are now, and so now our engineers deem that they're fit enough and they're worthy enough to be in our press. So yeah, we're very happy to have it, and again with many other features on the press all tied in, it really makes this new generation of press for me really exciting, because not only does it have obviously a very good business proposition, but there's some really cool stuff from a pressman's point of view, from an operator's point of view on it, that kind of excite me. Like we can remove the sheet guides underneath in between the printing press. I mean, many other little things on the machine that are really there to support the operator.
The little things really add up and make a big difference. And operators so often now are part of the decision-making process, that the owner brings in the operators and says, what do you think of this? What are the advantages to you? Because the owner of the business wants to know that. He wants to make sure the operator is going to be happy, because these guys are important people.
They're going to run it at the end of the day. And when a business owner brings the operating team, the operators from the company, I absolutely love it. Because it means we're going to have a deep dive into the press from a technical point of view, and so that for me is an appealing sales process and demonstration. So I encourage all of the operators to come if it's feasible to a demonstration, because you're right, it's such a big part of the process. They're buying a huge asset, and they need, I think, the feedback from the people who are going to be running that asset.
Chris, it's great to get this information from you. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great rest of your day. We'll follow up more later. Hopefully,
Not a problem.
next time.
Really appreciate it, Noel. All the best. Cheers.
Okay, mate. Bye.